today's video, we're gonna be discussing how to shoot with manual focus on a zoom lens. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. What is up? Welcome back. Pete here. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Pete Gottschalk, content producer here at Major League Baseball. And in today's video, we're gonna be going over a topic that I get asked about a lot, and that is how to shoot manual focus with a zoom lens. I assume there's some sort of fear inherently with shooting manual focus. That might be a barrier to why you want to get into it. I've talked many times on this channel about why manual focus is so important. If you want to take the next step as a shooter and a filmmaker, manual focus is critical, not just as a sports videographer or a sports filmmaker, but in general. If you want to take the next step in your freelance journey or making short films or doing whatever, manual focus is ultimately what people are going to look for in your work, and it's going to help you have more control over the settings. So today I'm going to go over some tips and some kind of ways of thinking when you are shooting manual focus, so you aren't scared and so you can get those good shots. And I know a lot of y'all shoot on zoom lenses, especially in the sports world. If you're trying to capture from far away, using a zoom lens is critical when someone's coming at you or going away from you. First on my list of tips for y'all, and this has also been said in many of my other videos, is using a monopod. Or in this instance, you can also use a tripod. When you're on a long lens, the longer the focal length is, the harder it's gonna be to be steady, and that's a whole nother discussion. But if you are on a long lens, like a 7200 or anything longer than that, you're going to want to be on a monopod. And this also helps you roll focus better because you are not holding the camera and rolling focus. It's just one less thing that you have to worry about whenever you're shooting. If we take this Canon 7200 right here, and you're hand holding it, you're obviously going to have to kind of do this the whole time with both hands, right? So naturally speaking, your shots are gonna be less stable. You're gonna have to have, one hand to support the camera and one hand to roll focus. And don't get me wrong, I do that sometimes when I don't want to be on a monopod, like if I'm shooting B-roll for pre-game or if I'm doing a really run and gun setup with this lens, I will do that from time to time. It's not my preferred setup, but anytime I'm shooting like a game action or something a little longer than that, or I'm far away from the subject, I will always use a monopod or a tripod. I prefer a monopod because it gives you a little bit more mobility. But whenever you're on a monopod, pretend my hand is the monopod. You're gonna have this hand to roll focus with, and then your other hand will be for hitting record, adjusting the ISO. You'll have a free hand and it will be less strain on your body, making your shots more stable and your arms less tired over time. It'll just be easier to roll focus. And a monopod or tripod is pretty much absolutely necessary for anything bigger than this. You really can't handhold a 300 or 2 to 400 or a 600, obviously, especially when you're doing video. I've seen people do handheld for photo with the 400, but it's still not as common. But that's my first tip. Definitely get a monopod. That will help you shoot manual focus better on a zoom lens. Now, my second tip is more of a kind of pre-shot tip, and that is to frame your subject a little wider than you normally would. So for example, if I'm shooting down the first baseline at a baseball game or shooting in the end zone in football, I'm gonna be a little bit wider than I think I need to be, because if the play comes at you, you're gonna have to zoom out. So to remove that zoom out, you can just shoot a little wider instead, and this will make it so you don't have to sacrifice your focus for your zoom out at the same time, if that makes sense. And if you're shooting in 4K, preferably you are at this point in 2025, then you can always punch in post, right? If you're a little wider than you need to be, you can always punch in. And if you're shooting for social, things need to be shot wider in general. So sometimes if I'm on the first baseline, I'm not gonna be shooting really tight because I know that subject is going to run right at me, and I don't wanna add a little zoom out in there. It's oftentimes hard to roll manual focus. At the same time, you are zooming out or in. You're gonna have to sacrifice one or the other. It's just how it works. Shoot wider if the subject is running at you. And just frame your shots with that in mind. If there's a lot of movement in the frame like this coming at you or going away from you, frame it in mind with that so you don't have to zoom out, and you can limit those. Or you can zoom in, zoom out in a place in the shot that doesn't matter. You don't want to miss the big reaction or big pound of the chest whenever you're zooming in or out. My final tip is just going to be practice, and then also manage your expectations. And what do I mean by that? Obviously, when it comes to manual focus, practice it makes perfect, as cliche as that is. You're going to want to just dive into it. It might be rough at first. You might miss some things, but that's part of being a creator and getting better at being a shooter or anything in life, really. So practice that, because it is a skill that you're absolutely going to need. And the more you practice manual focus on the zoom lens, or any lens for that matter, the better you're gonna be at it if you just dive into it and start doing it and practicing it and putting yourself in those scenarios. And then also, what I mean by reducing expectations is that whenever you're on a zoom lens, look, you're shooting sports, you don't control the environment. There's going to be times where you're gonna have to sacrifice the focus for the zoom in and the zoom out, like I kind of touched on earlier. You know, if I am in the inside third base well in the Braves game and I'm a little wider than I have to be, and I'm shooting player at home plate, that home plate is just gonna be a lot closer than, you know, first base, second base. So if the player hits a home run, when he goes to first base, when he gets there, I will start to zoom in, and it might be a little out of focus at times. And that's okay. It's less important to get that when he's rounding first base after like the 8-9 seconds in terms of like a social engagement type thing than it is to get the actual impact and the dugout's reaction behind him in the first couple seconds. So I start zooming in then, and then I nail the focus, right? And you can keep it consistent all the way until he crosses home plate. That's just a baseball instance. Expectations when it comes to manual focus, as long as you get the shot in focus enough for long enough, it's gonna be fine. You're never gonna nail every single perfect focus. It's hard in sports. If a football player is running right at you, it's really hard to nail that focus for the entirety of the shot. But if you get most of it, that's good. Ultimately, managing your expectations when in manual focus is going to help you become a better shooter. And diving into manual focus in general is going to help you become a better shooter. If you are interested in more manual focus tips specifically, I have done videos on it in the past. That includes peaking, zoom in focus assists, shooting on a higher aperture. These are just a couple of factors if you want to dive into those other videos that I can link in the description below. But that's all I have for y'all today. I know it was a brief video. This might be one of the last videos in this setting because I am moving soon. We're going to keep these videos going. But I really appreciate y'all. If you haven't liked and subscribed already, make sure you do that. And I'll see y'all in the next one.